What's up, everyone?
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Data Heretics Live with myself, Ku, Dave, and Joe. LinkedIn.
What's going on, everyone?
Hello, everyone.
All right. So if you're joining in on LinkedIn, please let us know where you're watching from. What time is it? You can let us know anything else that you want in the comments as well. But yeah, I hope you guys have fun in this session where we've got a few more myths to bust, a few more questions actually to discuss also. That might be interesting to hear from all of these guys. But yeah, just hope everyone has a good time. Feel free to drop in any comments at any point in time at all, and just stick around and have fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know who stayed up the latest to watch us live.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty late, actually.
In the morning where I'm living, man.
Before we dive in, I'm wearing a dedicated shirt. If for people who can't see, I'm presenting at Kate Strachny's. I hope I said her name properly. Kate's conference later in this month. I think it's October 27th. I can't remember what time I'm presenting, but I'm doing something where I'm going to do a whole presentation in memes only. So hope you guys can join in and check it out. Should be fun. But without further ado, I think we can jump straight into some of these myths that we're going to bust. All right, so what are some ways to prepare for interviews? I think this one is Ku's discussion point, not really a myth, but we can still bust it.
Not really a myth. Yeah, but I think it's a question that most of us actually get on LinkedIn, and I think it's something that a lot of people on their mind, like, hey, how should I prepare for an interview, for a data science interview? So maybe then I'll start the ball rolling then if that's the case. So generally, for me, what I kind of feel is that when you are preparing for an interview, you have to know, I think all the career tips will be there. Like, for instance, you need to know what the job consists of, what your titles and all this. And so yesterday I did a podcast episode with a friend, and what he mentioned was also quite something that I think most people should keep in mind of, and that is you are interviewed to be a problem solver. Yes, it's called data scientist. Yes, it's called a data analyst. Yes, it's called a data engineer and all this. But at the end of the day, you are looking to solve a problem. People are looking for you to provide a solution and all this. So you have to demonstrate that capability, that ability, that, hey, I can provide a solution to the problem that you mentioned just now. And depending, I think, on the different job scopes and all this, so you have to think about what kind of problems you're solving. And then you have to demonstrate that ability to piece up the different pieces that we have and put them up together. So to the people out there who, like, you're preparing your interview maybe later on in an hours or 2 hours time and all this, just think about the thought process that you have. Try to, as much as possible, accentuate and share to the interviewer what's your thought process, how you solve a particular problem, what's the logic behind, what's your understanding, and so on and so forth, which actually can take up, probably one project can take up about an hour, if you look at it. I mean, you talk about the data, you talk about the machine learning, you talk about which machine learning models to choose, and you talk about, so for me, I would love to have the interviewee talk about the strategy after the implementation. Like, so I'm going to implement this, how I'm going to use this machine learning model, or how I'm going to use the insights into my existing business process, into my existing business strategy, and so on and so forth. So I'll say, to prepare for the interview, yes, think about the problem, think about the industry, think about what kind of common problems they're solving, and try to talk about that as much as possible to show that you've done your homework, and also have the background to use data to solve the problems, the common problems in that particular industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with a lot of those points. So the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to sell yourself. I mean, you got to treat yourself like a brand, and differentiate yourself. It's highly competitive right now for a lot of jobs. So, if I definitely wouldn't advise taking the approach of trying to use the same playbook as everybody else up there. That's a sure way just to blend in and not get noticed. So, and actually somebody here, is it Bob Yakupov?
I saw that one. So I'm going to bring that up.
Yeah. So he said you need PhD or at least master's in data related degree. How silly myth is this? I think it depends who you're trying to get hired by. There's definitely some companies where that's gonna be a requirement. It's just a way for them to, it's just another hoop you have to get your jump through. And depending what the job is, I think it might be necessary. Actually, if you're doing like AI research, for example, like you should probably have a good academic background in this stuff. If you're going to be slinging Excel sheets all day, I don't think that that's really required. But who am I to judge?
Well, and I think so that I want to riff on what you just said, Joe. And not surprising, this might be a bit of a heretical view. You know, you can get on the internet and you can find like, here's all the data science questions that Amazon asks and Facebook asks and Google asks. All that stuff's out there if you want it. But here's a question that you might want to ask yourself. Do you actually want the job? Because as Joe indicated, maybe the job description says you need to have a PhD in this and that and the other thing. And then when you land in the job, you're just slinging Excel. And I'm going to quote Joe here. You're slinging Excel spreadsheets. Right. So what I would suggest people do, especially in the data space these days, is be prepared to interview the hiring manager to actually ascertain whether or not you want the job in the first place. Because there's a lot of like what the job description supposedly encompasses what the job's going to be. And then there's the reality in the trenches every day.
Oh, big time. There's a lot of bait and switch.
Exactly. Right. A lot of bait and switch.
It's a ton, man. I mean, all the time you see these job postings, and I would say the more complicated the job posting, the better the likelihood that it's going to be a bait and switch thing. If it's full of like, you need to know A through like AA or double B, or not even going way past Z even, then yeah, it's usually like a crappy job description, and you will usually indicate that definitely, as Dave said, you need to be interviewing the interviewer actually and understand like what you're about to get yourself into. I can't even count how many times I've have data science friends who've gotten jobs, and myself included, in places that end up being not so good of a fit because it's bait and switch. As simple as that.
I think that's good, Joe. A hiring manager who knows what they're doing and knows the space is going to have a nice, tight job description. It's not going to have like 37 requirements. Like you need 15 years in TensorFlow, and you're like, wait a second, TensorFlow hasn't been around for 15. That kind of thing. It won't be in it, right? A hiring manager that understands analytics and knows what they're doing, they're going to write a nice, tight job description. It's going to be very clear what you need to know and why you need to know it. That's a good tip off, right? That maybe this could be a legit job. So be aware, because there's a lot of job description bloat out there, and I think Joe's spot on.
Bob's come back with another question with us as well. So it's the interviewee's job to interview the interviewer on what the jobs actually entails. I think so, 100%. It's I think part of it is in Australia, like we sometimes call it being sold down the river, where it's like it's essentially like the bait and switch, but in a bit more fun terms. You can get into an interview, and let's say that you may or may not have as much experience as the interviewer, but they're talking about, oh, we can use the AI to personalize every single bit of experience for every single customer, and we're going to do it real time on the cloud, and all of those things sound really good. And I think it's very easy to get lulled into a position where you really, really want the job because the interviewer has sold it really well to you. But I think that's where you have to, like, whenever you're in an interview and you see all those shiny things being thrown at you, that's when you're almost like not your walls go up, but your alarms should kind of start turning on in the background. And that's when you can ask more questions about what's actually going on, what sort of systems are you using. But of course, not everyone's going to have that experience to actually know what questions to ask when you run into these sorts of situations. So I think there's there's something about being skeptical to a point, but not taking it down the negative route. So I think it's really good when you go into an interview, and it's great when, let's say I'm interviewing someone and they're very proactive in asking me about, oh, what sort of problems do you solve on the job? What sort of tools are we using? How large is the data? Do we need any big data techniques or different things like that? I think it shows that the person has a lot of almost like a proactiveness and awareness of what's going on. I think having that awareness is super important because it demonstrates that you have some understanding of what you actually be doing on the job. Like people think that, oh, we're data scientists, we're using TensorFlow every single day in Jupyter notebooks for every single problem, and we solve everything with a deep learning model. Like
that's literally what a company does, right? It's just
like every single AI company is doing exactly the same thing. So
it's I would add to that too. Like the other thing is, in an interview, you need to display competence and competence. It's not just what you know; it's how you express what you know and who you are. This goes a long ways, and don't be afraid to say no to people. Don't appear desperate. The weakest negotiation you can be in is when you're desperate and you appear weak and unconfident. So that's definitely one thing I can't stress enough. But the other part of it is understand the type of company you're getting into as well, the environment. Read Glassdoor ratings on the company and ask people, what's the culture like? Who are the managers? How long is it? How are the managers there for a while? Look at the team and the tenure, and because all too often it's the old saying, you don't leave your job, you leave your manager, right? And so what's a team like that you're going to be with? I mean, I question when I ask those questions about as much as anything else. What's the company like? What's the culture like? Am I going to like working with these people on a day-to-day basis and investing, ideally 2+ years of your time to this thing? And you got to choose wisely. I know money is important, but your time is also important. Don't waste your time in a shitty company.
Yeah. And in the past, when I was a hiring manager, not to put too fine a point on it, but interviewing people is a lot of work. Screening resumes, working with recruiting, talking to people on the phone screening, scheduling loops, bringing people in. It's a lot of work. So in the past, when I was a hiring manager, I wanted people to engage with me to ascertain whether or not the role was right for them, because the last thing I wanted to do was hire them and then have them either quit or go to another part of the company. And then I'm back into the hiring thing again, because hiring is a lot of work. I mean, it's fun, but it's not necessarily what I wanted to do all the time. So as a potential employee interviewing, don't be rude. I think to Danny's point, don't be rude. Don't be nasty. Don't be negative. But it's okay.
You know who I am.
I've got 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, dude. So you better answer my question. No, I'm kidding. But you should have some confidence to interview the hiring manager. One, because the hiring managers likely want to make sure that you're a good fit, and two, and this is from your perspective as the person interviewing, if they get bent out of shape, are you sure you want to work for them? If you're just asking some simple, polite questions and they're like, "What are you doing? Are you sure you want to work for them?" I don't think so.
It's not like the situations don't get better with time, right? Like if your spidey sense is right here and there's an issue, my experience is that doesn't really go away. It only grows. And yeah, it's like moldy bread. Like it doesn't get better with time. It's not like wine or something. It doesn't age well, right? So you should probably just go somewhere else, because you're gonna end up harboring this resentment, and that ball of resentment is gonna keep growing and growing and growing until you just quit that job anyway. So what's the point in even starting there? Unless you're making a ton of money, and then maybe if you're gonna sell your soul to Satan, get a lot of money doing it. So.
Well, AKA Fang plus M.
Oh, I just thought of something. Oh, sorry. I just thought of something. So I think you won't be able to prepare for all the questions. So generally, for me, I kind of feel that, let's say if I'm interviewing someone, I would if the person really do not know the question that well, do not really have an answer for it, I think the next best thing, right, is to present and share like how will you go about finding the answer. I think that shows a certain amount of like proactiveness, being proactive in solving a problem, knowing where to look for the tools and all this. I think that itself would also be a plus point for me, like at least if I'm a hiring manager, and that you'll be truthful to what you know and what you don't know, and you know how to go about finding out what you don't know. Yeah, I think that will really help a lot. Yeah.
I want to add just a few, maybe like some actual takeaways for preparing for interviews. I just jumped off a live call with my life coach, who was also a recruiter for like 20 something years. So we were talking about, so for when you're getting ready to interview with someone, go stalk them on LinkedIn, go and find out what they're commenting on, what they're posting, find out what sort of education they have, what background, what did they work on before, and try and build up like a profile of who you're going to be talking with. Like, I think it doesn't need to be creepy. Like, it can be if you really want it to be, but I think
just don't park outside their house or something. That's weird.
Yeah, like,
man, I just had this image of Hannibal Lecter, like Clarice kind of thing.
But I think having a, like, you can even mention it. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but for me, I'd be like, oh, I checked your LinkedIn and I saw that you have XYZ experience in digital analytics, and I really wanted to ask you a question about it. I think people in general, they like it when others show interest in what their experiences are and what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't need to be manipulative in that way, but you should be genuinely interested in learning from them. Because let's say they're the hiring manager, like, you're going to be working with them on a daily basis. Like, you, as an interviewee, you might want to try and find out whether you're going to get along well with this guy or girl before you actually start working, because by then it's almost too late. Like, you're stuck if it's not a good position and the relationship is not good. So in a way, like, if we think of yourself as a startup, maybe, like, you can almost like try and test and learn, fail fast, maybe. But to try and get as much information out of the interview as possible, you should be open with kind of like what things you've been doing, and just try and build up like a relationship built off honesty and trust, because you kind of need that when you're working. Otherwise you get into like this other realm of badness and like dodgy relationships. So I think that would be one of them. Another one for the interview was, I think on these days we're doing a lot of video calls. So there's like Zoom interviews, phone screening. One of the takeaways from the soft skills session that we were running earlier today was focus on your facial expressions. You're trying to stay relatively still and not using your hands to do a lot of gesturing all over the place that doesn't make any sense, where you're detracting from the message. Try to use stories as much as possible, because it engages like a different sort of thinking. It forces people to actually empathize and see it from your perspective, and you take them on the journey. I'm forgetting something else, but things like that, I think, try to use what you can to just try your best in the interviews. And I think over time, you should get lucky in at least a few of them. Hopefully. Yeah. There was, I'm looking at the comments. There's, Ayush actually has a really good question here. It's like, which is one underrated skill in data science?
I think it says that everyone will be saying the same thing. Huh? Yes.
I think Dave's gonna say Excel.
Oh, come on now. I could have said SQL. You never know.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Whoops.
But don't start with me. Start with somebody else.
Yeah, we'll end off with a big bang with Dave as the last person.
Well, Dave has the last say.
I don't know about that. Okay.
Yeah. Actually,
okay.
Joe, do you want to
go ahead?
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll go.
I'll take that. Or
I had
Cool.
I had something prepared for that one. So it was, let me
go for it.
So I put understanding the data lifecycle is undervalued and underrated as a skill for any data practitioner, whether in data science, data analytics, machine learning, data engineering, whatever. I think a lot of people, when they see the data, I think a lot of people think data science is kind of like a Kaggle competition where you get given the data and you just do the magic, do the thing with the data, convince the business to do whatever you want them to do based off the data, and then you ask for a raise because you did really well. But I think understanding how your data is generated, why it's generated, where is it coming from, how often is it being generated, what platform is it on, all of these things is super valuable, and they actually help you define what your solution could be as a consultant or an analytics expert or whatever. I think being able to understand as much of the context and the bigger picture is just the amount of value that's in that alone, cannot really be underestimated. And people, I feel that they often just kind of glaze over all of these things. More often than not, you just assume, oh, the data always comes in like this. She'll be right. You put the thing into production, the data doesn't come in. Then you're running around trying to figure out what happened. And all of this could have been avoided and at a much lower cost if you did the job of a business analyst to try and understand what was going on, what systems were happening, what was the process. You could potentially save your bacon multiple times over just by taking a look at what's there. So I think
I agree with that. Well, today I was spending all day writing trying to parse data that is getting to this REST API, because I really live on the edge like that these days. And yeah, I mean, it required digging into documentation and understanding what am I supposed to be getting? How is this supposed to work? It's a hugely underrated skill, in my opinion. It's people consider that more janitorial work. But this is what you're going to be doing a lot, is this kind of stuff. So,
oh yeah,
not writing deep learning models, and I know everyone wants to do that, but it's like wax on and wax off, right? So, you got to put in the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's so everyone wants to do the sexy stuff, which is the machine learning, which doesn't really happen that much in the actual in the bigger industry. And I think yes, the data lifecycle is also is really much undervalued. In fact, when I'm sharing with some of these IT professionals during my classes and all this, they kind of I thought I just have to build a data warehouse, and I just have to feed the data in, and that's about it really. Which is we all know it's not true, having been in the industry for quite a while already. There's other things even data quality you have to manage as well. How do you manage the data quality? How do you even do the automation? Or when you say automation, how do you collect the data? How do you ensure that the data you collected is of the right quality? How do you ensure that? For instance, so one example I usually give during the class is this. Let's say, for instance, if you look at customer ID, right? Every company has their own way of stating down what the customer ID format is and all. So you can actually sort of automate the process, yes, but there should also be another process to validate the quality, whether there's a duplicate, whether maybe the middle three numbers, 3 digits, is representative of a region code or something. Then is the region code within the legal set of values, and so on and so forth. So you have that, and then so one funny thing happens. Please correct me if my understanding is not correct. So one funny thing happens is I got people coming to me and say, "Hey, cool, what's the which one is better? Should I go for ETL process, or should I go for ELT process, or should I go LET process or TEL process or whatever?" I was like, I said, To be honest, I mean, as a data scientist, I don't really care too much. I just want to make sure that the data that comes into me, right, the data quality is right there, and I'm willing to work together with you to sort of automate and make sure the validation is done correctly, and all. But I do understand there are some subtle differences between the different stages at the order and all this. But having said that, I think for me, I'm not that technical. That's also, to me, it's more like, I think I would love to look at the data quality rather. And I think data quality, again, is something that is also undervalued in the whole life cycle. Again, not many people pay attention to that. Then there's also I think the data governance is also another one. I mean, I can understand that data governance, maybe you want to have it come later when the company hits a certain maturity level. But I think it's good to always keep in mind that you need to have governance instilled onto the data later on. So I think for the audiences who don't know about the governance thing, right, it will be like, for instance, if you need to change a certain value in a data set, maybe because of certain errors or whatever, how do you instill that process? How do you ensure that when you run that particular governance process, right, your data quality is maintained, your data accuracy is maintained, and so on and so forth. So if you look at it, my conclusion will be more of like, I wish more people pay attention to data management, data governance, data quality. I think these three are very, 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 very important. If I can put it 1,000 times, it'll be 1,000 times very.
For sure. I think the most underrated skill, this is probably the most underrated skill in business in general, is good written and oral communication skills.
Yes.
So if you can't effectively communicate your ideas to whatever audience you're trying to address, it's going to be really difficult for you to make progress in your career. I think it's a tautology. You can be a very good technician, but that's only going to take you so far. And so you see this a lot in data science, for example. A stereotypical data scientist may want to talk about ML models all day and talk your ear off about those things, and then maybe talk off the ear of like a business person who has no comprehension of what the hell you're talking about at all. they're just
What's a gradient?
Right. So knowing how to communicate, I think, is a never-ending quest. And I would say that maybe some ways to improve on this is write every day. So I try and make it a point to write every morning. And it's not so much because I'm writing a novel or something. It's more clarity of writing indicates clarity of thinking. And so if you're able to, I think, continually sharpen your ideas, that just makes you a better thinker and a better performer in general. So I would say that's the most underrated skill, not just in data, but in business in general. So.
Okay,
Dave,
so
do you want the final say?
Well, I don't know if it does have to be final or not, but it's not going to be Excel and it's not going to be SQL. Shocker. So I was just having an exchange on LinkedIn today with somebody, and I think, and I'm not going to use the term data science because you guys all know I'm not a big fan of it anymore. I'll say analytics, more of the umbrella term. I think the most underrated thing right now is good old-fashioned data warehousing. That is so underrated, right? I was having a conversation with somebody today, and there's nothing I like better than tapping into a nice, pristine Kimball dimensional data model for like sourcing my data, right? Especially when it's got all the upstream enterprise goodness that Ku mentioned, right? Data governance, data quality, all that kind of stuff. That makes me wildly productive. Whether that's engineering features for a machine learning model or what I really get excited about, which is like trying to understand the business in a new and fundamental way and advise executives on things and maybe change the direction of how the business is going. Nothing beats a nice data warehouse for that. Nothing.
I agree. It's kind of funny. My company, Ternary Data, I mean, we are increasingly focusing a lot on data warehousing, and I don't think it's a fluke. A lot of companies are, there might be self-selecting, of course, for us, but a lot of companies we run into, they have data science initiatives galore, but the data warehouse is something that's been sort of getting a lot of dust on it lately, and they need to revamp that. because the needs of data scientists are such that data volumes and data velocity are growing, and they need to migrate to something that's just more suitable for what the data scientists need. So there's a lot of demand right now for data warehousing. It's weird because for the longest time it was like, well, we'll just use our data lake and just use Spark on top of it. And I'm like, you still can do that, but I mean, a good data warehouse, like Dave said, that's when it's done right, it's a beauty. It's a work of art.
Mm.
Yeah, because I could, like Joe, I've built pipelines in R, oddly enough, that source data from a REST API, transform it, and then load it into a relational database. And that's fun and it's cool. But if I really want to make an impact using data with the business, it's not doing that. A data warehouse allows me to concentrate on the data and the business and not the other plumbing aspects of things. And that's awesome.
Hmm. So one of the myths that we were going to bust today was this one. So a recent survey showed companies are investing more in BI than AI. And why?
Yeah.
Because that makes sense. That's why.
Maybe this isn't a myth. This is more just like fact.
There was a survey that Elation, they're a data cataloging company. So they had this state of data culture survey they periodically do. This one was from September of this year. And they looked at the trends of, so it was a survey of, I can't remember how many people, but it was people working at companies, I think 2,500 employees or more, executives all the way down to kind of director level or whatever. But so one of the graphs they had was very interesting. It talked about how since COVID, more resources have been spent on things like visualization, data warehousing, BI, and less emphasis on machine learning and AI. And I thought that was very striking because it sort of fit what I had seen on the streets, which is like what we were just talking about. People are investing a lot of money into just better data storage and retrieval, like something that's completely unsexy. This company, Snowflake, almost $70 billion right now, they just IPO'd. The entire global data warehouse market is like maybe $20 billion. So you scratch your head about that one for a second. But it goes to show that there is a lot of emphasis on the trajectory of where these types of systems are going. If BI was dead, why would this company have this valuation? Because you're not doing that much. Snowflake's not one of those things you're using for like AI that often. You might be, but it's more data warehousing.
Yeah, there's this little company called Tableau.
Small startup. Yeah, like I hope they succeed. So,
yeah, one of the easiest reasons to understand why, I mean, all joking aside, is if you think of the analytics space as a pyramid, right? And as you get more advanced, you get to the top. But at the very bottom is like what some people call descriptive analytics, right? And almost everybody in an organization needs that. Almost everybody does. They need a report. They need to be able to slice and dice some data, whether that's an operational report or an executive dashboard, who knows, right? So if you think of the fat part of the pyramid, that's all data warehousing, Tableau, BI, that sort of thing. So it makes sense that people would spend more money there. In fact, they should, because here's my experience, right? And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier. If you get hired into a company and they're like, hey, we want you to build the bright, shiny, awesome, personalization, deep learning driven recommender awesomeness thing on our website, but they don't have sufficient descriptive analytics to actually tell what's going on in the business day in and day out, guess what you're going to end up doing? You're not going to build that bright, shiny machine learning thing. You're going to build reports. That's what you're going to do.
This is part of the bait and switch back to the interview that I would, the interview question, I would say definitely dive into this. Ask them the state of their data systems right now and what it would take to achieve doing the cool AI stuff. Everyone wants to do the cool AI stuff. I mean, and don't get me wrong, that would be great. I would love to do that all day too. But there's obstacles in place, right? Pretty major ones that take a lot of time and investment. So,
yeah, personally, I feel that if the company really is interested to tap onto the data, try to get the data capabilities up and all this, they have to start looking at the data first. They have to start getting the data in order first. So like what Dave mentioned about the data warehousing part, I think that part needs to be planned, well planned, because that has a lot of downstream impact to the rest of the companies, especially. And so once you have like get your data in order, right, then the next thing will be actually is reporting. I don't believe in like once you get your data warehouse, you immediately go to machine learning. I think it's reporting. And people kind of like feel that, hey, reporting is something that doesn't add too much value. I kind of feel that no, that's not true. It's because you never tie your reporting with your strategy. You're just doing your normal day-to-day, month-to-month kind of reporting, which is why you don't see any value of it. I mean, let's face it. I mean, for myself, when I was working in the banks and all this, we got all these monthly reports that we prepare. I'm pretty sure the management doesn't really look at it. They probably only spend like 30 seconds looking at it. Oh, everything all normal within the alert lines. Okay, done. We're done with already. Let's move on. But I think what really contribute value will be when we do the descriptive analytics, right? We try to actually set up the performance matrix that we want to report on, right, and tie it back with the strategy. As long as we keep continuing doing something like this, right, we will actually learn whether the strategy is working. That's one. And I think the good thing is that compared to the older days where we don't collect so much data, right, now with so much data, we can actually sort of like, hey, I think this strategy is not going to work anymore. Let's terminate this and let's move on. Let's conserve our resources. Compared to the older days where no choice, you have to expend all the resources first, right? Wait until the end of the strategy, then you know whether it works or not. So I kind of feel that companies are not taking advantage of that fact and try to tie the descriptive analytics with the strategy performance. And only I think after that, right, then this is where you start to think about how can I use the data to extend the competitive advantage. And generally, if you look at that already, right, this is where machine learning then will start coming into the picture. But it's still not deep learning yet. It could be a simple like linear regression. It could be a simple like clustering and stuff like that. Just in case I don't want to get the people's hope too high. Oh, let's finish the descriptive analytics. Let's go over to deep learning immediately. That's my take on how the company should progress. Yeah.
The big trend I do see though right now is the shift from a batch-oriented world into streams in real time. That's a big one right now. We do quite a bit of work with Apache Druid and their sister company Imply, and actually Kafka and a bunch of other streaming companies too. And I would say that's going to be the wave of the future and kind of is the present for some companies, but streaming analytics. So, and I'll give you an example of where this is valuable. I mean, one of our clients, it's a major e-commerce company, they before were running their business off of day-old data, right? You would batch the data and give them, you see what happened yesterday, and it's good, but it's kind of hard to respond to operational needs. And so once they implemented, a streaming system and then Druid, I mean, they were able to catch things within minutes, and it's adding a lot of money to the bottom line. They're capturing value from that. So, I'm of a somewhat heretical opinion that if you can do things in streams, I don't see why you would not do it in streams. So, I mean, that would be like the one sort of addition is, as you're looking at BI, consider where, more up-to-date data is going to be valuable versus waiting a day. And if you have to wait, if waiting a day is not a big deal, then it's not a big deal. But for things where you need kind of up to the second metrics and being able to respond to that, definitely plan ahead on that. It's a non-trivial problem to solve. It's getting easier, but it's still hard.
Yeah, and I'll offer a true story, by the way. So this is another one of those bait and switch things that Joe was talking about, right? Always be skeptical when a stakeholder comes to you and says we need something in real time, because this is a legit story from a large software company based in the Seattle area, which will remain nameless. A finance person told me that they needed real-time data so that they could do their work, and I said, okay, cool. Sweet. How often do you need it? And I swear to God, this is the literal response. If we got that like once a month, that would be awesome.
Wait, what?
Once a month. They said they were using the word real time, and once a month is synonymous. So always raise an eyebrow when someone says they want real time, because as Joe was indicating, putting the infrastructure in place to do that right costs a lot of money. And the business value really has to be there to justify it. And if the finance guy says he needs it once a month, don't worry about it. You don't.
My favorite question is always, so if I give you this report, what are you going to do with it? Or if you have the data in batch or real time, like what action are you going to take with this data? If they can't answer that within like a couple of seconds with like a sentence or two, and they either delay the answer or go off on some long-winded bullshit about whatever, like it's not a legitimate need. They're lying.
Yeah.
You can get a report once a month.
Because that's key. Joe's that I've used that same tactic, Joe, and it's brilliant. Because generally speaking, you got to look at the business process. How fast can the business actually respond to anything that you give them anyway? If you give them stuff every minute, but it takes them a week or 2 weeks to decide what they want to do, who cares? Batch it to them. Just batch it to them.
But
I think. You go. Sorry.
So Dave, to add on to your story, right? Mine was a bit of a reverse. So what happened was that the client asked, "Hey, I'd like to have a dashboard and all," and I said that, "Okay, sure, you want to have a dashboard. It's not operation dashboard now. Let me state it down first." So I said that, okay, so you want a dashboard. How often do you want to refresh the dashboard then? Oh, I want something like real time. That means that it's like always give me the real number, the existing number, and so on and so forth. I said, okay, sure. Even though in my mind it's like all question mark and all this. Then I asked, so can I just check with you, because he's the domain user. So I said, so can I check with you the data that sort of like creates all these metrics, like that calculates all these metrics, like how often do you actually refresh the data? Then how often does the new data comes in? Once a week. It's like, sorry, you want the data to dashboard to keep on refresh, but the data that comes in only changes like once a week. Yeah. I was like, okay. So long story short, I managed to put a gentle reminder to the client and say that no, that's not going to happen. You should actually maybe just refresh once the data comes in. Then you want to add something?
I lost my train of thought, but no, it's okay. Don't worry. I think that the thing that I had in mind before about the BI versus the AI and the machine learning and all of those different things, like I think people still, they kind of look down on BI. Like you can feel it, right? Like like you're doing reporting, like you don't do predictive models, like where are you adding value? I'm making money because my models are predicting which customers are whatever. Like I think that's not the right way to look at it. Like I think if you are working in like a mature data company where the systems are good, where do you think they start with their data? Do you think they start with deep learning models that do predictions?
Definitely.
No way, right? Like that you're all like anyone with a smart data strategy will always start from, okay, let's try and get the data so we can measure what the hell is going on and use that to inform the strategy. Oh, the strategy is, we have different segments of customers which are likely to do something. Okay, let's try and do some bespoke marketing campaigns for them. Maybe we give them a different experience or different things like that. Oh, it seems like we've got enough data based off what sort of interventions we've been doing. Now we can build some system that actually proactively predicts what they're going to do, and we can kind of be one step ahead. Like I think having the view of what's happened in the past and being very clear about what sort of value is being driven by different initiatives, you kind of need that before you go ahead and dive into the world of like recommendations, predictions, because if you don't have the data to learn from, then what are you going to make your predictions on? Like it confuses me because people always think of BI as like, they're just reporting, man. Like they just run the report. But if the management actually look at some of the reports and they use that to drive the strategy, isn't that really valuable? Like,
Of course it is.
A point of differentiation though is really when you're using AI for like unstructured data, right? So like freeform text or images, audio or video, like that. That's a separate use case, and then like by all means, knock yourself out on that. And there's a lot of value there. I mean, I'm working on one project right now that's it's a pure AI problem. As simple as that. And so, but that doesn't mean like you shouldn't not run your business on reports. That would be like insanely stupid to do. So it's just every tool's got its place, right? So
Yeah, I agree.
It also depends on how you define your value proposition and what gets you excited. So 5 years ago, I'd have been, dude, if it doesn't involve machine learning, I'm not interested in it. That's what I considered analytics to be. But when I worked at my last job and they brought me in to actually do an analysis and actually determine whether or not how we were going to do pricing on a new product launch, and now you're affecting company strategy at that level, that's pretty exciting stuff. And there's no machine learning involved in that whatsoever. What am I doing? I'm relying on the warehouse. I'm relying on reporting to pull the data I need and do the analysis. And I find that awesome, by the way, to be able to sit there and say, hey, you know what? I'm talking to this senior vice president, and you know what? I think this is how we should price the product. And they say, sure, Dave, that's exactly what we're going to do. Yeah.
Yes.
No machine learning, none at all.
Yeah.
These days, with BI data is a tricky one to use with machine learning as well. In a former life, I did a lot of automated machine learning. I was an engineer with making auto ML, and it would hook up to like traditionally data warehouses or some sort of source like that. What I realized early on was, unless you're doing sort of the bread and butter type data science, which we might talk about in a bit, things like forecasting, churn analysis, whatever, like if you're doing classification on BI data, almost always that data set happens to have the answer already in one of the columns, because your Kimball model is structured such that it's there to answer business questions, right? So if you're trying to do classification on this type of data, the chances are you could similarly just do it with a group by and make your life a lot easier. So, I mean, that's been my experience. I would say I don't even know how many machine learning models for different companies at this point with data warehouse data. And almost inevitably, it comes back to like, I think you want to reframe the type of problem you're trying to solve, right? Like most times that's probably a report. That's not really like machine learning. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you can, I mean, if you want to call it machine learning, like feel free to call it that. But really the approach you're taking to solve it is just classic analysis. So,
There's a really good question here coming in from Sumit from YouTube.
Cool.
It's heretical. So it's which company, or we'll say which companies is actually doing true data analytics? What are they doing differently? This is awesome. This is right down our alley. Can I add to Joe's point about doing the machine learning where in the data, you might have some leaky features that actually tell you what your objective or your target variable is. I think the art of machine learning and doing things properly is to build your data in a way where you don't have that sort of leakage, and to also get yourself a target variable which you can action. So for example, let's say you have a data set and it tells you who has churned in the last year. And you naively take like a 1 or 0 for the people who churned versus who didn't churn. And you try and build a model on that. It's not going to work well, because everything that we do in like anything where you're using machine learning outputs to actually drive some sort of action, there's a time component. And I think this, like we don't really, in all the things that I've seen on Kaggle, on the different tutorials and different things, like no one really tells us how do you propagate the label properly? How do you actually define like what's the lead time to someone actually doing the action that you want? And in my opinion, the only way that you can actually build it properly is to do true analytics in actually finding out, oh, what's the distribution of time until someone does this event? Like totally. if I'm going to make a prediction on who's going to churn, okay, I can make a prediction, but how much lead time do I give them? How much time is the business going to actually have to or send them a mail with $100 in it so they stay with you. Like different things like that. I don't think it's taught definitely not taught in, like, say, I don't know about universities, maybe Joe's university's courses. But I think it's one of those things where, as practitioners, where you've seen it done right, you can't stand by and see things not being done right and not say anything about it. I don't know if I worded that properly, but it's sort of like...
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's something related to cohort analysis, right? Like understanding how to split out your whatever population you're looking. I mean, I think an underrated skill in data science is actually like statistics, and so it's kind of weird, but anyway. Back to the question about what was the question in companies?
It was
dealing with
which company is
analytics?
doing true data analytics. It's a great question. Really great question.
Man, this is a loaded one.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Take that one, Dave. You got it. Or Ku.
I don't have a name in mind. I'll just say this first. Reason being is that, so just now, what Danny mentioned about setting up the target variable and all this, how do you set up the right target variables means that you have to like go into the data and have a look at it and all. You know that kind of concept itself, right? Actually, is so difficult. I have to say this is a huge challenge for me, actually, to go and share this thing with the participants for my classes, because they don't understand. First thing first is they don't understand how machine learning works. That's one. Second thing is they don't understand how the data works in the first place. And the third thing is that most people, they are just getting to know data, so they may not even know how to start exploring the data in the first place, trying to get the insights. They will be like, what? You mean average like this can tell so much? It's like, yes, you can actually tells a lot with the average. What? You mean a bar chart can actually tell so much information? Yes, you can actually do that as well. So I would say I think the current challenges for that, right, is more like, I think the getting more and more people involved, like what they've always have been pushing, and that is like the data literacy, understand like how data works, what data really can provide, where do you have to look at, where do you have to start looking in order to find more information, and I think all this training or knowledge is not sort of shared with a lot of people. I've seen like data scientists who can't analyze for shit. even if their life depends on it, because what they do is, just give me the data and I will push it into the model, and then my model will tells me something, and I'll just present whatever that comes out and so on and so forth. That's like, okay, so why do you use this model in the first place? Why do you choose this target in the first place? What's your supporting evidence and all? What then? It was like, no, what means supporting evidence? My class just tell me to put 1 and 0, and then I can start doing classification already. It's like, come on. If it was that simple, I would have replaced you with a software already, right? If that's the case. Then there's also the strategy part as well. So like in one of the class, in a few of those intakes, right, where I mentor and then have to complete a final project, they always like come to me and say, cool, this is what we're going to do. This is what we have analyzed already. So with this market basket analysis, we're going to now use the insights, right, and sell more products to the clients. So I said, yes, that's a very good idea, but how? When you say you want to sell, that is like a very motherhood kind of statement, you see. That's a very generic statement, you see. Your stakeholders is going to look at you and say, I thought that is what I learned from business school. You're telling me what the business school is talking about. Then I hire you for what? I hire my lecturer instead then. So usually when it comes to that, right, I will tell my mentees and say that, no, you have to go down to the data again. Look at the data, explore the data, then try to support whatever strategy you're proposing with the data. And that will give you more ground. That will give you more ground for arguing and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, sorry about the ranting and all. But yes, I think analysis skill is really underrated, no? Now coming back to what I think Apu's question is, I think analysis skill is really one of the most underrated skills also.
All right, so I'll take a stab at the question. So, but I need to preface this with, I don't know this firsthand. So the information I'm about ready to convey, I got from former coworkers and friends that have worked at this company. So take that for what it's worth. Amazon, from what I understand from a number of folks that I've worked with, and then they went to go work at Amazon over the years, Amazon is a very data-driven company, and that's because that's the way Jeff wants it. For example, if you propose anything, from what I understand, you have to write up like a document, a Word document, proposing what you want to do, detailing all the things, why it's going to be good for Amazon and for Amazon's customers and all that sort of thing. And you have to include how you're going to measure success, how are you going to define success. So from that perspective, it's a very analytically data-driven kind of company. Now, like I said, this is secondhand information, but these are people I trust. So I think that's from what I understand, that's a pretty reasonable representation of what goes on at Amazon. It's a very data-intensive company, and that's because at the very tippy top of the company, that's how the boss wants it, and it just rolls all the way down from there.
Think of the types of attributes that would make a company like Amazon or Google as productive as they are with data, right? Like they've achieved digital, like they're a digital company to their DNA, which makes it possible to be analytically driven. I would say the types of companies that would be true analytic companies share those attributes of having achieved either they're natively data driven and digitally driven actually, or they've completed a digital transformation to the point where that transformation is encoded in the DNA of the company. Like everything is like they're leveraging technology to be a better company, right? That's also like a really small number of companies, I would imagine, just given my experience. But digital transformation is going on. I would expect that the companies that survive in the next 10 years and the new types of companies, new companies have the advantage where you can start from scratch and be digitally native from day one. And when you're digitally native, I would think that you're inherently, if you have the culture, you should be data native as well. Because anymore, it's like, how would you not be, especially in a day and age when any new company or application is probably going to have some sort of AI element to it, or maybe not, I don't know. But I think it's a lot easier. The hard thing is for like existing companies to make that jump, right? If you're some like Dunder Mifflin or some company like that, like you're kind of screwed for a lot of reasons. And to make that leap into being completely digital and by default data driven, and it's a tall order. There's that ship needs to turn around, and I would say a lot of companies probably won't make it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. And by the way, kudos for the Office restaurant reference. I like that. So think of it this way. It's probably likely that any company that makes most of their money through digital advertising is probably very analytically driven, because they don't have a physical product, right? It's all about ad revenue. So they're going to be religious probably about A/B testing and hypothesizing and experimenting and seeing what works, because all of that translates down to the bottom line. Amazon might be in the same boat because they sell a lot through their e-commerce website, so it could be the same thing as well.
Oh, there's a comment here. I wanted to bring it up because it's somewhat relevant to this discussion about social media. So here we go. So I think it's in response to another question that was being asked, but I thought it would be really interesting to hear what you guys think about The Social Dilemma. Don't know if you guys have watched it.
Haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet?
I haven't seen it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. When my wife and I watched it, my wife, after the Social Dilemma, went and deleted her Facebook and Instagram accounts. So
sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It is what it is, as they say these days. So Yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, I've been getting off of social media for a while. I think the only social media account I still have is LinkedIn. I mean, as I posted too, recently, like I've been having to block people that posts like QAnon type stuff. Right? I don't think it has any place. Like, if you want to post that kind of crap, put it on Facebook or
Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah, or whatever, Parcel or whatever it's called. But
Mm.
yeah, I thought it was really well done. It's kind of funny because if you work in the tech industry and the data industry, it's like this isn't anything that wasn't like surprising to anybody, but I thought it was really well done. And the ironic thing is that it was put up by Netflix, who in and of themselves is a very large data aggregator and recommendation engine. So, but it's all for a good cause, I guess.
Didn't they pioneer the idea of using big data to like create content that they knew people would like?
It's addictive in the way that like ice cream's addictive. So it's not addictive in the way like heroin or crack's addictive, like Facebook. So yeah,
I think it was an interesting movie. I felt that it was very like one-way street. Like everything is bad, social media is bad, technology is bad is the next leap to it. Where like I don't know. I think it was an interesting. It's a dilemma essentially. Like there's all this good that goes on, but it wasn't mentioned. There's when we view it from a data perspective, there's like, of course, there's going to be more data that's generated, and if we store it, if we're going to store it, we might as well use it to get back the investment of whatever we put in to store it. What's the easiest way to do it for the big tech companies? It's going to be at scale. What's the easiest way to do something at scale? Through your huge customer base. And I think it's all very logical, and like in a way, it's very capitalist in that sense, where like if there's financial gain, people will do it. They're talking about legislation and different things to try and limit what people can do with it. But I think it's over time, like companies have incentives to go around those things and do it anyway, in some sense, because that's where the money is. But from a technology perspective, I think it's getting to the point where like you can see where everything's going. Like over time, the predictions will get better. We'll get more and more data on what people are doing. I think that's a really interesting space to play in, like the ethics and what do you do with all this data? What's good and what's bad? Where do you draw the line? Like, I think that's going to be like a new issue coming soon, if it hasn't already started already.
Privacy is like, I think that's the big issue of the 2020s is privacy. It's interesting. Yeah. Dave may be with me on this, but like, I'm an old timer on the internet. I had my first email account in 1992. Like I was around before there was web actually. And so you were on like the Well and places like that back in the day, and bulletin board services, and and when I think, man, exactly right,
C64.
Yeah, this isn't a flex or anything, but it's just like we were around before these. But I remember there were chat rooms and stuff. You could talk with people, and that was kind of cool. There was like 2 people, but whatever. But it's interesting because back in like the early to mid 90s, there was this utopian vision of what the internet and the web would be, right? This like social gathering place where the information superhighway and everybody would like come together and form a grand new utopia. And it's turned into exactly the opposite of that. Like if you had told us like back then that this is what the internet would be, I think all of us would have just said, let's not actually continue on this experiment at all. Let's just stop. You had that choice back then, actually. Like we could have just taken it in a different direction, but the internet was commercialized. AOL, spammed everyone with like thousands of CDs in their mailbox. And then, you fast forward to today and here we are, right? The entire world's connected. I mean, I remember walking around like, this village in Cambodia, in rural Cambodia, and people are on their smartphones on Facebook. That's insane, actually. And so it's interesting how much social media has basically taken over the entire world. When I'm in Asia, for example, it's interesting. It's like everyone's got a smartphone. Asia's way better at smartphones than we are in the US by a long shot. Like I think they're more technologically advanced in a lot of ways. But this is the universal gesture right now. This.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that is the position most people are literally in anywhere you go in the world right now. Usually on social media, it's insane.
So I haven't seen the film yet. I'm planning on seeing it. So what I'm about ready to say, take it based on that level of ignorance. What I would wonder from those of you who have seen it is this really that fundamentally different than a doctor on a television commercial in 1950 recommending that you smoke Chesterfields because they're good for your health? My point being, using media to manipulate people to get them to exhibit behaviors that are profitable to the company in question, that's been around for a long time. So I'm just wondering, was there like some sort of like psychiatrist that was on the movie that's like, look, this is worse than TV by a factor of 10?
I think the big difference, though, is that it's weaponized and it's personalized, right? Like, you can hyper-target somebody with a message or an ad or like whatever the hell you want, frankly. And that might be the big difference. It's more like back in the day when you had like 2 channels on TV, and between like Leave It to Beaver and whatnot, you see a cigarette commercial. Like everyone saw the same commercial, and so everyone smokes. But now it's interesting. I mean, media has become so personalized and individualized. Like nobody's feed is the same. It's all tailored to like what's going to get a rise out of you, and that's why I left, because I realized that it's in some ways it's good. There's definitely some good interacting with people on social media, but in a lot of ways, like you're just putting yourself in a position to basically be in your own filter bubble 24/7. And so the only things I consume now for personal reading is like long form articles. I actually rarely watch news because I think that that's stupid. If I do, it's like actually looking at both extremes and understanding is there like a common story. But I read a lot of books, and between that and like long form essays, I think like 99% of the stuff out there is noise. And like, why would you put yourself into a situation where on social media, like everything is like tailored to make you do stuff? I don't know. That's me. I'm Amish, basically.
And by the way, I think Joe would agree with me on this. To everyone worldwide, he's primarily talking about U.S. news.
Correct.
Maybe news in your country.
Talking about all the foreign channels and how awesome they are. And like, yeah, that's not what we have here. We have like WWE basically for like every channel. So it may be called like CNN or Fox, but really it's just like people beating each other with chairs and jumping off of cages. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
BBC's good. We're not talking about BBC. We're talking about other stuff.
Yeah, like trash. We have like the Jerry Springer show is like what we have. Like it's shit. Better news.
There's a comment here from Andrew. I got a 1200 BPS with C64 in grade 10. I'll have to admit, this is a bit before my time. So I don't understand.
Now you're talking my language, Andrew. Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's not my time. I'm lost at this comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like a computer?
So my modem, so it's a Commodore 64, guys. That's what he's talking about, the C64. So the modem I had was actually from a VIC-20. That's what my dad bought. So it was like, I don't even know what bot it was, but that thing was so slow. Oh my God.
So,
all right.
If we're still talking about social dilemma, right? Is it a movie? I didn't remember it's a series. Okay, never mind. It's okay. Doesn't matter. But I kind of watched it, and I mean, I have been reducing my social media scrolling and all, but I still go to most of these platforms. Like I still go to Instagram, I still go to like LinkedIn, I still go to Facebook, Twitter, and all this. I think the reason is okay. My belief is that I think at the end of the day, all these are technology, and I think we are responsible for our own behavior. I'll put it that way. So generally, I use all of them as a learning tool. So like LinkedIn will be more a learning tool. Twitter will be also a learning tool as well. Because I think some of the very smart people are actually on Twitter more than on LinkedIn. Like I think like Julia Poe is one of them. I don't think you can find Julia Poe on LinkedIn in the first place, right? You probably only find Julia Poe on Twitter.
That's
You
too
find
bad
Nasi-
because Twitter is like a cesspool these days. That's just too bad. Ugh.
Yeah, I want your followers. Like,
yeah, so to me, I kind of feel that I think it's how we use the tools. Although I can identify with some of the things that was mentioned in the series, like in the social dilemma movies, like for instance the way they put the like now and then with all the different reactions, so as to make it a bit more granular in terms of capturing the data and all. But I kind of also see it as I think Facebook to me is a way for me to now, or it's a tool for me now that I can leverage on, right, to keep in touch with more people compared, to the older pre social media days, or the web 1.0, where it gets very difficult to how to put it, socially maintain relationship, put it that way. I mean, if you look at it, right, I think in the older days before social media and all, when we want to start a conversation, we really do not know how to start a conversation. I mean, I'm really that socially awkward until I look at the person. I don't know even like what do I say. The only thing I can remember is always talk about the weather. Hey, the weather is very nice, and then you expect the other person to like start the conversation. But nowadays with like social media and all, right, I think for me now, at least it's very easy. It's easier. Hey, I remember you mentioned about this. What really did happen during that day? Or hey, I saw your Instagram post. You went to this particular restaurant. What do you have for that day? Or hey, you went to this particular movie or pre-COVID days. Hey, so how was the movie like? No spoilers, okay? That kind. So it's much easier leveraging on social media now, at least for me, right, to maintain the relationship and to warm the relationship with a lot more people compared to the pre social media days though. That's how I see it lah. So I agree with you, Danny. I think the social dilemma was a bit one-sided though. But I think the fact that the social media companies never provided, I think the other side of the stories also says quite a fair bit of what they're doing lah as well.
Yeah, I just. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There was actually a response from Facebook. They published like I wouldn't say it a paper, but they actually have like a full on like few thousand word response to social dilemma.
Oh,
I'll try and find it and link it to everyone.
Sure. I only saw the one that is from Yan. Yan actually posted it on his Facebook account, talking about what was on it and all. But I haven't got to it yet lah. It's a bit like TLDR response though. Yeah.
but I think that highlights though for data professionals, again, like I'm fully convinced that privacy and almost a backlash and against mass surveillance is going to be the big theme of the 2020s. We have to get out of this somehow. It's destroying us as a civilization, especially where Dave and I live in America. This place is not the same. And I would say social media had a big role to play in this. And so you're going to, I would say that if you're a data professional, think about how the world is going to be changing, because you're in a near inflection point right now where you will start seeing regulatory changes, behavioral changes with respect to how people want their data treated, if at all. My dad, for example, he's crazy and he says stuff and sometimes he's right. And he has one prediction he has is like, I think people are just going to get off the internet at some point. And he said that a few years ago. I was like, yeah, you're full of shit. Like, no way. And now, well, I mean, people are getting off of some versions of the internet, which is like, I got off social media. For a lot of people, that is the internet, right? And so you may not be able to escape like the internet per se, literally like IoT and stuff, but like you're going to, I think, start getting out of the ones that may not be the best thing for you. But yeah, fully convinced. So think about like, as data scientists, what does that mean for your career going forward? If your access to data has changed, or the type of data that you're analyzing is changing, maybe it won't be a free-for-all now. I mean, what types of problems are you going to be solving in the future?
So here's the fundamental question I would guess, right? I mean, there's this adage that says, look, if if you don't know any better, you're the product. Your data is the product. Have people gotten to the point where they'd be willing to pay a subscription fee to use Facebook if Facebook said, in exchange for giving us money every month, we won't collect your data and we won't
I would
use
gladly
it.
do that.
Target ads for you. I mean, Instagram. Are people ready to do that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but essentially it's like, obviously there's value in social media. I mean, look at the four of us. We only know each other through LinkedIn. It's the only reason why we know each other, right? So there are good things that come with it.
And there's good social networks. I think LinkedIn is a great one. And I'm doing my best to keep it great by just blocking all the dipshits that post stupid, idiotic stuff. Like they need to be off the platform.
Everybody out there, keep LinkedIn good, please.
Yes,
okay?
please.
Please, for the love of God, please keep it good.
But the other social networks I see that are coming into, I think, popularity are things like Slack. I consider that a social network, right? Like Slack groups and all this other stuff. Like I think you're going to start seeing more of a reversion back to communities. I mean, the entire reason people did social media in the first place was for community. Like you can hang out with your family on there and your crazy uncle and all that stuff. And like, now you can just do that on text or Slack. And so, but yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Well, and I'm not that familiar with Slack. I'm assuming that at some point you need to pay for it.
Yeah. I'm glad they
level of usage, right?
Yeah, but
I've run into that running the Data with Danny Slack group. So I think you get your first 10,000 messages and then you have to pay to keep the rest of them. Otherwise, they get deleted on a rolling basis.
So that would be an interesting. That'd be interesting what Joe was saying, right? Yeah, if people.
Yeah, and I actually I would like a social network where messages just disappear. Like you're having a conversation, but it's just like talking.
Yeah, that's a Snapchat. Wasn't that Snapchat?
Yeah.
Slack chat.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
not surprisingly, as a Commodore 64 owner, which by the way I still have mine in my garage right now, I've never used Snapchat. I'm proud to say that. Thank you very much.
I think Andrew was one step ahead of us as well. So he actually commented like half an hour ago. He said, "Make social media subscription based." So
Andrew,
maybe you guys,
yes, it's like we share the same brain or something.
Yeah, kindred spirits.
Actually, if you ask me, I kind of feel that it's okay. It's okay for social media to be subscription based. But I think, having said that, what's going to happen is I definitely will be cutting down on the platforms. Not like now where I'm like on all over the place, but only spending like maybe 10 to 15 minutes for each one of them. Rather, I mean, I have to watch out. The price one. Cannot be. What if there's going to be like this streaming war that we are in, right? Like 20 over streaming companies, like each one of them charge $5. That's $100 already a month, and we don't really consume that much content in the first place. Not all the 20 platforms.
Yeah, which reminds me, Ku, I got to cancel my cable because I have all the streaming services and I never watch cable.
Yeah, that's the point, right? It's like over here in Singapore, we have all these like streaming wars now. So like Hulu, we have over here we also watch Chinese channels as well, right? So there's like all these like Chinese streaming companies that are doing it as well. So we have like a streaming war here. And it's like I calculated, right? If you really subscribe to all of them, right, that's like $100 to $200 over here in Singapore. And I highly doubt anyone will be watching all the channels every month. I think that's ridiculous. Like even for me, Netflix now is like maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, and then that's about it already. I'm still subscribing to Netflix just in case Netflix is watching this. Yeah, because of the social dilemma.
All right, so this brings up an interesting question that I want to pose to you, gentlemen, if I may. If you had to pay for subscriptions for social media platforms, which ones would you be willing to pay for?
LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'd only do LinkedIn.
How about YouTube?
Maybe.
I consider YouTube a social media platform too.
Yeah, I'd pay for YouTube.
YouTube, yes. For me, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, I think these three will be a no no-brainer at least. For me, this will be these three. But unless they start charging like a hand and a leg for it, and I'm a very stingy person, like more than $10, and I won't even consider it. I'll just terminate. Sorry, my friends, I won't be keeping up with you. Bye, guys. LinkedIn, I will because got you guys there.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'd have to pay for YouTube because, like, if a pilot light goes out on my hot water heater, where do I go? I go to YouTube to figure out how to light it. I need YouTube. I need it.
Like, that's the thing, right? I think YouTube is actually replacing a lot of my Google searches. Like, I'll go to YouTube before I go to Google. Like, for, say, I need to do, how long do I cook a steak for, or a certain cut of meat, or whatever it is. Like, if I go to Google, like, there's all these different, like, all these guides, and I'm not going to read that, man. Like, I just want a video, like 30 seconds or something, that tells me exactly what I'm going to do in a visual format, so I can kind of hold my phone whilst I'm cooking at the same time, or something like that. Like, something, I feel that a lot of the search and the information retrieval, like, the web was the first one. Google is your first place. For things which are going to be more visual and more video and word, like kind of like hearing based in the future, like, we're going to move more towards like the Alexa world, YouTube video first world. And I think that's a really cool, and like, it's just going to happen, like, sooner or later.
Yeah, you're right. I like, so for YouTube, like, for instance, I like to go to YouTube for the online lectures. So like the CS50 is really a very good series to introduce people on computer science, the one that's from Harvard. Then of course all those online lectures from Berkeley, from CMU, from Stanford and all. I'm following them actually to understand the latest development for deep learning stuff and all. So they put all this great content on YouTube. So I'm more than happy to actually pay for YouTube as well, just to get all this great content from other universities. Yeah,
I'd only pay for LinkedIn, YouTube myself, because that's basically all I use anymore anyway. I got off of Twitter because, God, Twitter, oh, jeez. And Facebook, my parents aren't happy because they don't know what I'm doing anymore, but it's okay. I can text them.
That's for their own good, actually. So
I think so. We're like 80 odd minutes through this live. We could probably keep going for like hours.
Is there anything still on?
I think there's a couple more questions. I think.
There's a really good question here from Shalom. I hope I'm saying your name properly. How do you teach intuition? And
you ever thought of that, Danny?
Let's see. Making a lot of mistakes, learning what not to do. I do a bit of meditation myself to try and like clear out all your crap and garbage that's going on inside your head, like pinging you at all different times, to try and clear out the white space. So you have you have the ability to actually hear your intuition coming out and trying to tell you what to do. But apart from that, I think, usually it's just best learnt in the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, I agree. I think with data, especially, like, there's a certain point, I've heard it described as like you can start seeing behind walls. And I think that there's like, I don't know, in my space where, in the realm that I work in, I mean, it's interesting because I could talk to a client and probably within about a minute or less understand most likely what's going on and potentially how to solve it. Obviously, you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. You want to listen. But there's a certain thing, and I think to echo what Danny said, like, it just comes through getting a lot of lumps and experience. And I think after a certain point, at first you're like, sort of, you're incompetent when you first start out. There's no way else to describe it. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and the only way to know what you're doing is to keep doing it. And sometimes the hardest and best lessons are nothing's free in this world. You're going to make expensive mistakes. So
yeah.
through that makes you stronger.
Yes. Same point as well. I think practice and practice, I think get more experience, hands-on experience and all. I think that will help with the intuition part. I think the other second point I'd like to point out is try to learn from community, try to learn from a network of friends. I think that will also help a lot in terms of sharpening the intuition. Like for instance, I mean, you can like look at how other people comments certain articles, and then you roughly have some idea like what kind of experience they have, why did they comment it this way and not the other way, and so on and so forth. Which is why I set up the tech community here in Singapore, so that everyone can come together and learn from each other's experiences, and all, and that will sort of help sharpen up that intuition bit as well. When you know, or if you put it the other way, that is how you can also sharpen up your BS detector lah. BS detector. So hey, this is really no this yeah. So let's move on. This cannot be true. So that helps a lot also as well. So I would say practice and networking, and try to learn from more people, learning from their experience. I think that will help a lot. Yeah.
Dave, your thoughts?
Oh, I guess, well, the first thing, and this might not be particularly helpful for the discussion, I guess it depends on how you define intuition. And I don't actually know what the textbook definition of intuition is. But if you think of it kind of as more of this esoteric, like you get insight from the universe in a flash kind of thing, maybe you can't teach that if that's the way you think about it. But it seems like what we're talking about, which is what I would think, generally speaking, the question was aimed at, which is like, how do I get a sense of what's the right thing to do in a particular situation? And that's probably based on the sum total of your experience. So obviously, the more experiences you have, a broader range of information you have to grasp from.
I think that another technique, I think it was Charlie Munger who first started, describing it as building up mental models. So take the time to read widely and understand different aspects of the world, understand chemistry, understand physics, understand math, literature, etc. Because you start creating what is called Lollapalooza effect, where all these different ideas suddenly coalesce into sometimes flash moments, right? And so you gotta have. I tend to take the approach that it's like you gotta be multidisciplinary and be curious. That also forms intuitions, because it's, in a lot of cases, like if you're it's almost a paradox, because if you're too into your field, you're actually worse in some ways because you're too narrow, right? So the only thing you can do is this one thing, and anything outside of those bounds is, you're just kind of ignorant of it. And the other technique I use a lot for intuition is actually inversion, right? So you invert the question or invert the problem and flip it upside down. And so Jeff Bezos actually has a really good approach to this, which is for Amazon. Like, you could think about, okay, so what are the ways that we can go conquer the world this year? And it's like, oh, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of ways you could do it. But the more important question is, well, okay, so what about customers are not going to change every year, right? People aren't necessarily going to want more expensive things next year, right? Or they're not going to want them slower. So if you can always work on optimizing towards, if you flip the question around and think, okay, so like what's not going to change? Customers are always going to want things like cheaper, faster, higher quality. So that also, I think, helps develop intuition. If you can like narrow down what you're focusing on and have a true north, as your criteria, that really does help, I think, establish intuition, because it's the number of things you have to think through is just like greatly reduced.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I was just had a spark from the universe while you were talking, Joe. Also, too, is like if you're talking about an analytics professional in a specific role or a specific company, for me, I've always found that no matter where I work, I have to get steeped in the data before my data intuition, if you will, starts to actually function correctly. And to Ku's point, that's not machine learning. That's good old-fashioned analysis for the most part. That's how you get steeped in the data, and then you start to build an intuition about the business. Yeah. Like in my old job, my last job, people would ask me like, Dave, what do you think about this? And I'd be like, well, I haven't looked at the data yet, but my spidey sense, my intuition tells me that this is probably what we're going to see. And the only reason why I could do that was because I'd steeped myself in the data for like multiple years. I was in the data like every day. So if you're thinking about data intuition, get in the data. Don't worry about fancy machine learning models. Just get in the data. Start making up questions in your mind and just look at the data to answer them, and then start just getting steeped in it all.
Yeah. So David, to a point, right, another spark from the universe again. Was that so? So I get this question a lot, and that is like people say, "Hey, let's say if I want to be a data scientist, should I go the route of like, should I start off as a data analyst first before I go to a data scientist?" I don't know whether you all get that kind of questions, but I do get quite a lot over here. And generally, I say that actually I think that is the best route. From a data scientist, from a data analyst move to a data scientist, and not like one is beneath the other or whatever. I don't think that is the case. But having said that, why that is the case is because if you start off as a data analyst in the particular company, right? You like what you mentioned just now, when you start analyzing the data, you start to gain more and more like intuition. You get to have some more sense about how what the data is, what the business process is, what's the policy and compliance is. Let's say if you're working in the banking or healthcare industry, and then that kind of intuition, right, really can sort of be brought over to a data scientist role. And that intuition helps a lot in the machine learning aspect of things, like how. So hey, maybe in this particular problems that I have, right, given the compliance, given the regulations and all these, I can't use this particular model because cannot be explained. Something along that line kind. So I kind of feel that yes, you can be a data scientist immediately, I mean, you don't have to go through a data analyst or whatever. But having said that, I kind of feel that it's good to take that path, because I took that path, which is the data analyst, and then after that move over to a data scientist role. I actually love what has happened because of the grounding, the foundation that was built at the data analyst role on the intuition on data and moving to data scientist.
Yeah, well, there's one primary area where I would argue where what you described, Ku, is 100% applicable to machine learning, if you want to use that as the definition of a data scientist.
Sure.
Feature engineering.
Yes.
Feature engineering.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what features to go with? How do you create the potential possible features? Although I know we will still have to validate it through the correlation or the distribution checks and all this. But yeah, you're right. I agree. The feature engineering will have a lot.
If you're doing machine learning on structured data, feature engineering is, I think, the most important thing you need to do. Period. Like, that's also the most underrated thing, I would say. Like, but if you can't do good feature engineering, what are you doing? You're just throwing like a random CSD into a model. Like, that happens a lot, actually. So
I think
just throw another layer in there, Joe, and the features magically show up, right? Sure. That's what I do nowadays.
Sorry, Danny, go ahead then.
Okay. So I thought I've seen posts around on the LinkedIn where like some people are saying that you don't need analytics to be a great data scientist. I kind of strongly disagree, because like every single step of the machine learning process is steeped in analysis, data analysis. Like you do your features analysis, you do your results analysis. You have to do your splits of your out of time data set analysis. If you have your model, how are you going to actually run it? Do you target everyone? Do you do the top 10%? What are their return rates? What are their conversion rates? What's the time to them actually doing the event? All of this is analysis. So, and if you really want to be an efficient and effective data scientist or machine learning practitioner, you need to be good at those things. And like those things are best learnt by being really deep in the data. So you might have a data scientist title, but you're essentially doing data analysis to figure out what's going on. So sorry, but I strongly disagree. Like I think analysis is the cornerstone of any machine learning role. Like if I'm hiring for a machine learning practitioner and they can't answer those sorts of questions with data, like I can't trust you with actually building a model and putting it into production for me, because you won't know how to like measure what's going on. Like this.
The people who say that kind of stuff, I'm kind of the opinion that when they start working more, they'll just realize that was a really bad thing to say, right? Like it's a regrettable statement that's probably going to be learned the hard way.
Yes, I agree. I probably it's the same people that says that data analysts are the one who clean data for data scientists. I think that's kind of BS again. Yeah, it's Dave, it's a true story. I heard that before. Okay.
I believe you. I'm it's sad that I believe you.
Yeah, it happens. I was so shocked, and my jaw literally dropped. Well, I mean, not to the floor, but I was like, oh my god, it's like, so I asked further. I said that, so the data scientist who said this, right? Where did he come from? What's the background and all this? Sadly speaking, it came from the person actually graduated from a boot camp. So going back, I think the question that we had for this whole session, and that is what's the underrated skill in data science or data analytics. I think I'm now of the conclusion that let's flip the question and says that what is the overrated area skills in data science? And I would say machine learning. Then if
Machine
that's the
learning.
rest, machine learning is overrated. And I think the rest of the other things that comes with it, right, are the ones that is super underrated and definitely not sexy. I'll put it that way. Definitely not sexy, but it's needed. If you don't have those, you can't make machine learning work. I'll put it that way. Yeah. Right.
I mean, the entire reason I started my company, for example, is because we kept seeing over and over personally, like people doing machine learning projects and failing because they failed to build the foundation, analytics, data infrastructure, etc. And so, like, after seeing this a bazillion times, started a company focused on data architecture and data engineering, the foundations. And I remember at the time, data science friends were like, "You're crazy! Like, why would you start a company like that? Everyone wants machine learning." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's also like your success rate right now with machine learning is like practically non-existent. So maybe we should try something else."
Yeah, exactly. And I think the common misconception is that linear regression is not machine learning as well, because the mathematics is not complex. It's not complex enough. And so it's like, yeah.
You can
Dave,
SGD. You don't have to use the closed form. You can use SGD, and then it's machine learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's that. I think these are some of the challenges that we have. I mean, like I share with other folks. I think because data science is a new field. I won't say new field. It's a repackaged field. I would say. Yeah, and so that's why I think a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of like myths and all this, and I think it's also one of the reasons why we come together and try to bust this up and like educate. I'll put it as educate the audiences and also business alike and all this. Make sure everyone's job is easier. Don't have to always be a victim of data myths or data misconception and stuff like that. Yeah. Then you got more things to add?
We actually we missed a lot of myths to bust today because we just kind of had a very robust discussion about all sorts of things, which is fine.
So, we can keep it to the next section. Yeah,
definitely next episode. I wanted to just recap this one. So Kapal was asking, because we talked about intuition and it comes with experience and getting lots of bumps and figuring out what not to do. And I think her question is still really valid in terms of, can it not be taught? And I think one way that we can teach intuition is to kind of share our experiences, like the people who have been in the trenches making the mistakes. If we're there sharing what we've done wrong and why it didn't work, what we learned from it, why we will never do that thing again. I think the more people that we have who are sharing those learnings with everyone, that's how we can kind of move everyone forward. But I think it's for anyone who's trying to learn how to sharpen their intuition, you have to be kind of like keep an open mind and keep an eye out for posts where people are sharing their experiences and try and find the people who are doing this and learn from them. I think it's one of the only ways.
You're right, Danny. I agree with you. So like yesterday I did a podcast session and we were talking about boot camps. We were talking about boot camps and all this. And I think I also like to remind the audience is I think personally I'm not against boot camps. I mean it's a great place to network with the like-minded people and all. I think we all are on the same page on that. But I think more of like, hey, if you're going to go for a boot camp and all, please have a look at the instructor experience and the background. Because what you want are their intuition. What you want is for them to hand over to you their intuition, their experience that you can learn from, so that you don't repeat the mistakes that they have made. So do check out the instructor experience. Like I said, always check out the instructor experience when you're going for a boot camp. Make sure that the instructor has a lot of experience that you are looking for, that you like to learn from. I think that will help a lot in sharpening the intuition part of things. Yeah.
And I think in a professional context, if we wanted to find intuition in a professional context, I think it can be taught, because maybe in the end, what it boils down to is just a critical thinking thought process that just goes on in your mind. Like, for example, I'm in a particular situation. This happened to me all the time when I was a consultant, right? Because as Joe knows, you go in and you're kind of, you're tap dancing around a little bit, especially early in the sales cycle. And what you do is you stitch together, at least I did anyway in my mind, how is this particular situation analogous to other ones that I've had in my past, and then extract from that salient features, put them together, and maybe that's like a professional type of intuition. That sort of thing I think could be taught. But again, if you define it as like the universe pops an idea in your head, I don't know if you can, by definition, you could teach anybody that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think as well in a professional context, the biggest advice that I give people is like understand how your company makes money. And work backwards from there. Because if you can work backwards from there, then I think it clarifies a lot of things. If you don't understand how your company makes money, and hence how you make money, then I think it's really hard to develop useful intuition. You could develop intuitions, but I don't know that they'd be really like that relevant, right? Like you could develop, intuitions about when like the coffee is like warm in the break room or something, but like nobody really gives a shit about that at all. So you could develop an intuition about like sales aren't good. What does this mean for the company? And like, what should I be focusing on for analytics? Like that's probably a more useful intuition. So, or about what Brenda and HR is doing, like that's not really a good intuition. So, there's different types of intuitions. So
Andrew, I think Andrew Huddleston brought up something, and that is be willing to take risks and be willing to fail and all this. But if I were to add to his point, right, I think yes, willing to take risks is one, but also maybe collecting the relevant data. Collect the relevant data so that we can learn from where we make the mistakes. I think that would also help a lot. Yeah.
The making mistakes part is an interesting statement though, because it's you have to be in a company or in a team that allows the psychological safety to fail, right? If you fail and it's Schadenfreude everywhere, like everyone's just making fun of you and wants you to fail, like that's a toxic situation right there. Like you should be able to fail and I think have a group learning about it. If you fail individually and that's deemed bad, then I guess that ain't good, right? So how are you going to develop useful intuition in that regard? Develop intuition. You'll develop a fear-based intuition. I think that is not good for anybody.
No.
Yeah.
And
my personal view of
go ahead.
Okay. My view of intuition is more along the sense of like the universe, like sparking something inside your head. Because I found that most of the time when I'm trying to solve a business problem that's really difficult, I need that spark from the universe. And it doesn't come from, yes, it does come from the experiences that I've had, but I still need that like almost I'm looking for the serendipity where the idea just comes right in front of me. And I believe that it's more around just believing that you have the answer within you and kind of just letting things happen. And it takes like a degree of like self-belief. You have to really fundamentally believe that you can solve the problem. And it goes back to, I think, the first interview thing where we're saying, like, when we're working, we're working for our boss. We're not always working for the company in a sense. So if you're working in the right environment where you are allowed the time to make mistakes and learn, where you're given the time to actually think through the problem properly before having to make a snap decision, you're more likely to be put in a position where you can get those sparks of intuition to give you the answer that people have not seen before. So I think for me, I really enjoy talking about that side of intuition, but I know it's not for everyone. Like there's going to be a lot of people who like don't believe in that stuff and think like I'm a hocus pocus folky, whatever sort of person.
Danny Ma, the hippie data scientist.
Yeah. Like,
when I was younger, and I rock climb a lot still, and when I was younger, I used to, go and do stupid things like climb without ropes and that kind of thing. And so it was interesting because it became this intuitive game in a way where you would climb, right? And after you've been climbing a while, for example, you understand like how to look at a cliff and like understand like how to get up it while you're doing it. And in the event that you have a rope, that's great because you can make mistakes. In the event you don't have a rope, that's kind of dumb actually. But you also learn to trust yourself, right? Because you kind of have to at that point. And so I think that was an interesting experiment. Like I think real-time intuition building, because you either really figured out if you had it or not. And it's amazing what you can figure out and intuit when you're forced to do so. Like you can push yourself a lot farther than you can.
hmm.
Yeah, actually, to Joe's point about the psychological safety and all this, right? I reminded me of two things, and that is what I think Dave shared previously in one of his posts, and that is culture eat strategy for breakfast. Yeah, setting up the right culture. I think that's very important. And also reminded me of this book that I recently finished. It's called the Phoenix Project. I don't know whether you all have heard about it from Jin. Yeah, it was quite a good book. Like, people are telling me actually now I should move on to the Unicorn Project. It's much better than that. But I think the Phoenix Project was was it Unicorn and Phoenix first? Let's see. Unicorn was the second book, right? Was that the one?
Yes, Phoenix Project was the
Phoenix was the first one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the one that I read was actually the Unicorn Project. So my bad. And Unicorn Project did mention about psychological safety and all this, create that kind of environment where the software engineers can fail fast and quickly test out their codes and then quickly sort of change their codes if there's a need to, rather than the scenario that was initially painted in that particular book. I love that book. It's very, very good for someone who's like not from a software engineering background. So for the audience who have never really read, please really have a look at it. I think it's a very good book that's told in a story manner, which is fantastic, easy to follow.
Awesome.
Okay. Yep.
Very, very awesome. So I think, yeah, let's conclude it here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll just keep going. Like, I don't know what time it is. It's like,
close to 2 hours.
Yeah, it would be past my bedtime.
Yeah, it's getting late.
It's almost midnight on the East Coast in the United States.
Yeah.
So it's getting late.
Yeah.
Episode 3.
Yeah. So I guess, thank you everyone who has stayed with us up till now, or who will watch it later in the replays. I hope you guys have had a lot of fun. We sure had a lot of fun talking about all these different things. But stay tuned for more information around how we're going to do this. I think we'll probably keep it like once a month. This is really fun. Like, keep an eye out for announcements from Dave, myself, from Ku and Joe on all sorts of things. And please comment on our posts, interact with us, do what you can, say hello. And yeah, on that note, I think everyone have a great day or night. Take care of yourself and see you next time. All right.
See y'all.
Bye.
All right.